All right!
Hey, you. Yeah, you, I'm talking to you. You ever want to make contraptions like this in the test server, but you don't know how? Ignore that. Ignore that. You ever want to make contraptions that go and run like this in test server, but you just don't know exactly how? I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks with pad swappers. The video reached 100 likes. As promised, I'm gonna do the pad swapper tutorial. Alright, pad swappers are very simple. They're a very simple concept. If Sonic were to run past this, he exits out of the blue side, where all level chunks that have a blue shade of tint, a blue tint to them are interactable, that you can interact with them. But if I were to run past the other side of the pad swapper, I would run past the purple part, which means that all purple chunks in the level are interactable. So for instance, I wouldn't be able to pass through this wall because this wall is blue tinted, and I ran past the pad swapper that had blue on the side where I ran past. One thing that's interesting about pad swapping in this game are loops, and I'll tell you why. Because these two loops are basically these right here. These chunks are special. They're special in a way that whenever Sonic interacts with them, they change paths.
No way!
Whenever Sonic goes through a loop, the top halves of the loops are the ones that switch paths, not the bottom parts. Now I'm gonna go through a loop, but I'm gonna set the pad swapper to blue. Now let's see what happens. What? He was able to go through the loop, but you just told me that if I were to run through a pad swapper and I run through the blue part, I would interact with the blue parts of the level.
That is where you are wrong.
So why is it that this loop, even if you add a pad swapper that would typically disable it from working, works anyway? And it all has to do with these two chunks right here. When these two chunks are connected, they act sort of independently, or they act as one solid chunk. And the reason why it isn't affected by pad swappers is because this loop is essentially a pad swapper in itself. Let me explain.
No way!
Now that we know about pad swappers, we can move on to the loops. So basically, we got basic loops here. We have the normal loop, the tall loop, and the super tall loop. And remember, you gotta use pad swappers when you use very tall loops, because these two chunks aren't connected, so they don't act as a pad swapper. I kind of like the shape of these ones that they give. They're pretty cool, but at the same time, these ones can kind of break on you, so I wouldn't really recommend overusing these ones because they do tend to break sometimes, and you can go really crazy with the shapes. And this one has probably have to be one of my favorite ones. Kind of looks like it's kind of like a pill-shaped loop. It's kind of slanted, and I kind of like that, the way it looks. And there's also these. Me personally, I wouldn't really add these. And of course, we now have the long-awaited P-shaped loops, where you run down and down and down, and you gain more speed. And before we had the P-shaped loop, we had to improvise. So we created a gimmick, which is what I like to call the E-shaped loop, because as you can see, it makes like an E shape. It's kind of supposed to act like a P-shaped loop. Now, along with the P-shaped loops, there's also D-shaped loops. I'm not sorry. Now, along with the P-shaped loops, there's also D-shaped loops. This is practically just a P-shaped loop upside down. And this works basically how you would think, right? Bottom half of a loop doesn't have pad swapping capabilities. In order to accommodate for this, you're gonna have to use a pad swapper object if you're gonna want to use a B-shaped loop. What is that, you ask? Why does this loop look like this? It's for a reason that I'm not really sure about. Now, I know why it's like this, but you would think, oh yeah, this would work, right? It's completely fine. See, Sonic would run down here, he would run over here, and then he would run up here. But that's where the problem lies. Now, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it just doesn't work. And I think this is because you set the path swapper to purple. So Sonic runs up here, and then he runs through this loop. But then there's a problem. There's already a purple wall right here. So Sonic can't get through. Maybe something like this. So I guess the best option would just to be to try and work around it by just not really adding all of these loops together.